Okay, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Gary Parker. I'm the Managing Director of CNT Associates. I'd like to welcome all of you this afternoon to this webinar called Bid Writing for Beginners. I'll do a presentation shortly, which will take a bit longer than normal. It will be about 40 minutes because essentially what you will get is an overview of this. We will be sending out a summary presentation free of charge, which is about 20 slides to everybody who's registered and attended. You can buy it from us, the full presentation, which is 47 slides for £12 plus VAT, and you'll get an email about that after the presentation. Obviously, you can make notes as you go along. We've had a lot of people register for this, so I'm going to give people a couple of minutes to log in. But if you can please remain on mute while the presentation is taking place, there will be an opportunity at the end to ask any questions. We also have another guest speaker, Rachel Barham from the Federation of Small Businesses, who will speak towards the end about what FSB can offer people. And she is here live in our office today. We've been operating on Zoom together for the last 15 months. So when it comes to her presentation, we are going to swap seats. What I would also like to say is that this is being recorded. We may put it either on our YouTube or platform or LinkedIn or some other platform. So if you don't want to be recognized for any reason, please turn your camera off and remove any other distinguishing features. If you're still concerned, then please contact us because we take your safety concerns very, very seriously. We did put this on the email that went out as well. You can put your details in the chat as well, but remember, people will be able to access those as well. So if you don't want people to access the chat, then please don't put any details in there. Okay, I can see we've now got 28 people online, so I'm going to start very shortly. For anybody who just joined us, I am Gary Parker. I'm the Managing Director of CNT Associates. We are a business support and training organisation based in Southeast London. And can you keep your yourselves on mute, please, while the presentation takes place? There will be plenty of time afterwards to ask any questions that you've got, and you will be receiving an email with a summary copy of the presentation afterwards and a number of other offers. So I will be starting very shortly. What I'm going to do is share the screen and I will take you through a presentation about bid writing. And I will, there's a lot of information contained within this, and this is a new slide presentation. So I'd like to thank Sybil Mayard of Sybil Tech for helping me develop this. So I'm going to share the screen now, and we will shortly go through this. So here it is. This is called Bid Writing for Businesses and Social Enterprises. So it's an introduction and an overview to bid writing. This is me. CNT has been around as a company since 2003, and we've got offices in London and the northwest of England. I'm a member of the professional body, the Chartered Institute of Fundraising, and also a number of other organisations. and we work regularly for many organisations delivering funding courses, researching funding sources and writing applications. We do, and you'll get this in an email later, we do coaching for people and groups as well, and we do bid writing for a range of organisations, large and small. Contact us for details about that service, and so there will be an email later. So here are all our social media links. We've got a new YouTube channel as well. If you go on YouTube and search for CNT Associates, you will see it. It's not been around very long, but we have got some videos on there today, and this may well end up on there as well. So there are all our links. You can also link in with me, Gary Parker, on LinkedIn. I'll be very pleased to link in with anybody who wants to do so, as will Rachel, I'm sure. So with that, we will start the full presentation. What are we going to cover today? We're going to cover finding the right funding, submitting a quality application, and look at equality, social impact, and other related issues. And then we'll have a very short bid writing workshop. This is quite a complex subject, so it's not possible to make it interactive. At the moment, we are looking at that, and we're also looking back to holding live events soon after July 19th, subject to the usual restrictions, etc. Just to clarify, basically there's two elements to bid writing. One is actually the bid writing side of itself. You know, how do you do it? How do you develop an application? And the other, of course, is where the funding is, which is where we're going to start. So, because of course you might be able to write a bid, but if you don't know where to find funding to support your bid writing, then that's going to make things more difficult. So we're going to look at both those key aspects. And as I say, we do run a range of other training and support for people. Look at our website and we'll send you an email about that later. So we're going to start with my 5 top tips. This is based on many years of experience of bid writing for organisations I've worked for and supported, and for my own organisation as well. So the first tip is to decide the direction of your project or organisation and look for funding to support it, not vice versa. Don't just look for money because you think it might help your project in the long term. Even if you're successful in the short term, in the longer term, you've got to develop a sustainable strategy for your project or organization, whatever it is, whether it's a community organization, whether it is a business. You've got to decide where you want to be, where you want to go, and find direction for that. You also, my second tip is to research funders, because like I said earlier, there's no point in learning to write a bid if you can't find any funders for it. So the next thing you need to do is develop a project plan or outline what the project is going to do, what it's going to achieve, or what your organization is going to do and what it's going to achieve with timescales, etc. And then develop a model application. And we're going to look at this. I'm going to show you an easy way how to do it later and build on that. So you develop an outline or model application, and then you use that both to populate application forms and to be a core bid for your particular project, whatever it is. And my final tip is be persistent. This takes time. It takes time to develop applications. It takes time to research them, and the funders take their time to assess them, as you would expect. So you're not going to do any of this overnight, so don't be a quitter. But to be honest, this is not rocket science. I meet many people with challenging jobs. This is you're not born to be a bid writer. It's a skill you can acquire and develop. What we do here at CNT is really to facilitate that and help you to do it quicker than you might do on your own. So we'll start with funding. There are a number of types of funders, and I'm going to look at them in groups today because we've got limited time. We've got grant-making trusts and foundations, so that's charities and others. Then you've got statutory funding, that's central, local, regional government, national government, and there's even still some European funding around. It is residual for the next couple of years or so, but there's still some around. And then, of course, you've got lottery funding, you've got funding from companies in the private sector, and finally what's called social investment. That's kind of hybrid funds. Sometimes it's part grant, part loan. Sometimes there are other strings attached to it. I think that's the easiest way of defining it. And you've also got crowdfunding, which we're going to look at very, very briefly. So what do you know about these? Let's have a look at some of them. Charitable trusts and foundations in the UK. There are a lot of this. Charitable trusts, they give out significant sums of money. The biggest one in the UK is the Wellcome Foundation, which was set up by the Wellcome Drug Company, which gives out over £700 million a year, and that's just one charitable trust. There must be charitable activity and within the criteria in the trust deed, so they've got to, all of these charities got to carry out charitable activity, and they vary widely from very small grants, usually from about £200 upwards, but some less than that sometimes, right up to the larger grants, £500,000 plus. Wellcome Foundation I've just mentioned offer some worth £3 million, so they do vary significantly. Assessment can take time. They can take from a month to 3 months or to a year, so you have to give plenty of time for these. They like projects which make money go further by levering in other funds. So what that means is if you've got some money from somewhere else already, then that can help, but it's not essential with all funders, and with others, for example, the lottery don't require any match funding, as it's called. You may be able to lever in other funding, however, if you have got funding from other sources. Larger trusts may be prepared to take risks and to support hard to fund projects. So there are some funders out there that will fund even some causes that are not very popular with other members of the public for whatever reason. So there is many different charitable trusts that have many different aims. There's a couple of examples here. There's a site called My Funding Central, which is part free, part pay. It's free for smaller organisations. That's a good place to start. Another one I'd like to mention here is one for women-led projects, because there's a lot of women on this call today. The Global Fund for Women, which funds supports activity led by women and women-led organisations throughout the world. That's an American-based charitable trust in that case. Who are the biggest charitable trust funders? They do vary. You've probably never heard of many of them. The Wellcome Foundation I've already mentioned is another. How much do they give out? They give out, and this is just charitable trust, doesn't include the lottery, etc. 5 billion, yes, that's £5 billion a year. There's a post on my LinkedIn site where a researcher did this several months ago, and that money is still there for a whole host of reasons. Of course, there will be more competition for it, so that's where bid writing comes in. And again, if anybody wants any more information about this, please contact me outside this meeting. Then you've got statutory funding. By that I mean national and local governments, health bodies, housing associations, European funds. And the difference between that and charitable trusts, if there is one, is that grants are given to further the statutory funders' objective. So if you're working for a housing association, get a grant from a housing association, then it will probably be related to either the housing itself or the people who live in that particular in the properties of that particular housing association. They often have larger and longer grants than trusts that are more likely to fund your core costs. Most funders tend to fund projects rather than, that is, doing things rather than what you are, basically. I think that's the easiest way of describing it. The more bureaucratic and inflexible, and like many charitable trusts, and even more so with statutory organisations, they prefer to fund organisations and groups rather than individuals. Application processes may be complicated and with more than one stage, because sometimes, when you get a lot of applications, they'll have a stage 1 and a stage 2, and there'll be guidelines and support for the applicant. It's usually done online these days. Again, some sources here. Your local council is a good one, even if they're not funding things. They have links. CCG is, for anybody who doesn't know, is a clinical commissioning group, which is still around at the moment, so that is going to change. They fund health-related projects, and again, there's a few other links there. myfundingcentral.co.uk, another very good site, which is free, but also has some paywalls on it, is grantsonline.org.uk, and that covers a whole range of areas, not statutory funding, and gov.uk, which is the government website. Utilise that as well. Lottery funding, that's we all know about this. It's distributed by a number of organisations, and there's a number of strands to it. For example, there's Awards for All, which is a smaller strand up to £10,000, and then you've got other organisations that distribute it, like the Arts Council, the Heritage Lottery Fund, the Big Lottery Fund, Sport England, and a range of others. On the screen there is the lottery's main website, but you can Google all these links as well. But there are a lot of lottery-funded organisations and sites these days that distribute money. The lottery, of course, comes from a percentage of the money put in by people playing the national lottery. The next group is companies. These are not generally useful for small voluntary sector groups, but are probably good for many others. They're often only small amounts or one-off grants, although not exclusively. Some of the bigger ones offer bigger grants or other kinds of support. One of the issues is that many companies only give to well-known charities or charities that are advocated by their employees and suppliers. Some companies can provide help in kind, like free legal advice, second-hand furniture, and others, and they generally tend to have what's called corporate social responsibility policies. So whoever gets funding from them has to comply with that. There's a few sites there that are worth looking at. The Entrepreneur's Handbook, which is a good one and has about 60 pages of grant funding on it throughout the UK. The Stable Company is another one that provides a range of support. And the final one there is Business in the Community, which has got some good links into a range of organisations. They promote links between businesses and charities and other non-profits. So again, all of those potentially worth looking at. I'm not going to say too much about this, about crowdfunding, but this has become increasingly popular, where you put a project on a site. If it's in the non-profit making sector, you look at sites like crowdfunder.co.uk, and then if people like your project, they can make donations to it, essentially. In the private sector, it's slightly different in that you have sites like Crowdcube, the Dragon's Den type investment. And what they do there is to they have investors who will invest in a company or project, and of course, if it's successful, they've got to share in it. If not, their money's at risk. But there are a number of aspects to crowdfunding which I'm not going to go into today. Again, if you want to know more about that, please contact me. And there's a few sites there. I've included a couple of others, Indiegogo.com and Kickstarter.com, which is an American site which operates worldwide. So we'll move on. Here's a number of other interesting sources. The UK government has a business finance support link on there. That's well worth checking out. You can do a customized search. Business Hub London, which is supported by the Mayor of London. That's a very good site, particularly if you're a business or social enterprise looking for funding and support. There's a lot on there. The British Library runs some excellent support in a number of areas, especially around intellectual property, and there's a lot of very good video support. The British Library is open, has reopened, and they may go back to doing either group or one-to-one support live in due course. I think they're doing it online at the moment. So that's well worth checking out. And then you've got other organisations like Social Enterprise UK and the NCVO know-how site, which is about non-profits. Going to round off this part of the sections with a few sources of funding. This is for capital funding. That's related to premises and equipment, because some funders will only fund capital funding items. Others will only fund revenue funding, and that's running costs, which we'll find do in a minute. And others will fund both at certain limits. But these are the capital funding sources, so it's for premises, equipment, and anything related to that. There's a national lottery. They've got a strand of that, and you can get up to £500,000 on some of their programs. Another one is called Garfield Western. This is for charities only. They will fund capital funding. They do revenue as well, as do Henry Smith's charity, who have no limits. And then another one called the Bernard Sunley charity, which again is mainly capital funding. The next slide is revenue funding. That's funding for running costs, so salaries, and a whole range of other costs, promotional activities, quite a range of things there. You need to check on the site to see what precisely they will fund and they won't fund. But revenue funding is all non-equipment funds, basically, and covers a range of areas. It could be premises hire, it could be salaries, it could be sessional workers, it could be software, it could be promotion, it could be website development for your project, etc., etc. And here are some funders that will consider all of these. These are more numerous than capital funding. So some there you've got Awards for All, Paul Hamlin Foundation, which supports new projects and arts-related projects, Santander, which supports a range of projects, as does the YAP Charitable Trust, the Welcome Trust, I've already mentioned them already, and Henry Smith. Innovate UK, which funds tech projects, will fund revenue costs, And again, there's more details on the My Funding Central site of both capital and revenue funding opportunities and organisations. So we're now going to move on to bid writing, and I'm going to go through some of the main issues on this. The first thing I'd like to say is that the gap between success and failure in this area is very slight. It's marginal. So detail is very, very important. So you need to get, I would advise, if you can do it, to get someone to proofread your work. I certainly do that myself. And the other thing is, if whoever's proofreading your application, make sure they don't know much about it or anything about it previously, because if they understand it, then you're on the right track. If it's too complex and people don't understand it, then it's less likely to succeed. And don't assume that the person on the other end has any specific or key knowledge about your project or organisation, because chances are they won't have. So, you know, keeping things clear and concise is very important. But many bids fail for two reasons, and you would be surprised at what they are. One is that they're not submitted on time. For those that have deadlines, and not all funders have deadlines. Some, like the lottery, have got rolling continuous applications. And the other is they are either incomplete or in some cases not signed. So if you get those two right, believe you me, that significantly increases your chances of success. I know that always surprises people. So before you begin writing, you need to consider your project proposal, what it does, what does the project want to achieve, who the beneficiaries will be, what services will you offer, and what area will you work in. So it's all the basic information, really. But it is important that you focus on that, and then you can match this up with the funders that will support this work that you want to do. You need to come up with a description of individual steps required to achieve your objectives. I'll give you an example here. So 5 12-week courses comprising 1 hour of support, individual guided learning sessions, 4 by 1 hour, and 4 1-hour group sessions, 4 1-hour tutorials, and 4 to 6 hours of open learning with access to IT facilities. For example, that was an IT training project. But you just need to work out what are the steps required to achieve your objectives. You need to focus on what the resources are to support the development of your project. I mean, so there will be, you know, a number of elements to most projects, including staffing, premises, volunteers, if applicable, materials, and administrative support. If you don't put those in, then even if the bid succeeds, it could leave a hole in your budget. So you need to consider what resources that you need to successfully deliver your project. Another thing you need to consider is what the outputs are. These are basically the deliverables. So the activities, services, numbers, products, results, and these need to be purely factual and quantitative and must relate to your objectives, e.g. 35 trainees completing level 1 course, 36 weeks of training undertaken with an average attendance of 18 young people, etc., etc. So it's purely, whatever they are, purely factual. These are just examples. Outcomes are the qualitative changes as a result of the outputs. So, for example, with an employment project, the output will be people would get training and skills, and the outcomes is that those people will get jobs, and that will benefit the community more widely, in terms of community cohesion and more money in the community, etc., etc. So outcomes are different than outputs because they're more about qualitative changes and anticipated changes. So again, here's some examples: improve literary skills among the target group in the target borough, and increased English skills in 90% of refugee children completing courses. Those are the outcomes of the training and skills that they've acquired. Your outcomes should reflect your aims, whatever they are, and you should be able to monitor and measure them in some way. For smaller applications and for smaller funds, these are usually very limited, as are evaluations of the outcomes of the project. But even on small with small funders and projects, you'll still have to provide these, even if it's only in a very limited way. So you should be able to, you should have a range of key performance indicators. You know, how many people are on a project, you know, what have you delivered, how long it took. There's a whole range. Whatever your project is, you need to have key indicators on there. You need to be able to measure them to be able to measure your project's success, of course. Often on applications, you'll need to back up your project with statistical information. And you may be asked to prove the need for the project. For example, if you've got a well-being project, you might want to look at the well-being statistics in your area in terms of, you know, mental health issues, etc., etc. But of course, where do you get relevant statistical information? How can you collate it, and what are the sources of the information? So here are a few. I mean, there are many sources, but I've come up with the most obvious ones. The first one is, of course, local government, because most councils have a lot of information about their locality and key issues, demographics, who lives in an area, etc., etc., and what the key issues are. So you should have a look at that. Your local health organisations are a good support. Clinical commissioning groups and the NHS are very good, and they often have documents that detail a lot of information about local services and issues related to health and other things. And then the other one is the national body, the Office for National Statistics, which hold a whole range of statistics on both on localities and nationally as well. So there's some to start with. There are others. Again, this is an area that we have got a lot of information about. When you're submitting a quality application, here are key points to remember when submitting a funding application. The first is, do you need to register your interest? It's an obvious one, but you may not get access to the application form if you don't. Sometimes they have what's called a PQQ or an EOI, that is pre-qualification questionnaire. This is especially for bigger funders, or an expression of interest or smaller ones. What these are is the initial information about your project or organisation, because often if funders think there's going to be a lot of applications, this is an initial way to sift people out, because what you have to remember with fundraising is and writing applications is it's not an inclusive process. It's designed to throw you out, not make you succeed, because not everybody can succeed, and there's limitations on funding. So you have to be very careful in the way and methodical in the way you approach this. You need to read the prospectus or guidelines carefully to see if you're eligible and what you can deliver and how much money you can get, etc., etc., and ensure you have suitable systems in place to cope with this, and also to apply for a budget you can cope with. I mean, generally speaking, if you're a small organization, you shouldn't be bidding for more than 40% of your income in a year, because many funders operate what they call procurement rules, and that's one of them. Not exclusively, because others will give any organization a chance, but many bigger ones do. So they will not give you funding beyond usually your yearly income. Another issue is around clarity. You need to explain fully how the project fits funders, priorities, and their target groups. Answer all parts of each section clearly, and quantify outputs clearly. Use bullet points if necessary, because this is one of the other things now. Many application forms are very short. You might think that's easy, but you try distilling a complex project down to 50 words. It can be quite challenging. You also need to quantify the outputs and outcomes clearly, use bullet points, and of course usually type your application. There's very few handwritten ones these days. Here's some good practice. Read the whole form before you start. Fill in all the straightforward sections first, the easy sections first, and then you can focus on the more difficult sections. Ensure all those involved with the delivery and monitoring of the project have a hand in writing it, particularly if you're working for a bigger organization or with volunteers. You need to have buy-in from everybody, and they can often contribute to the application as well. If you've got managers involved, then ensure that managers are briefed and have ownership of the project as well. Then they can contribute if they wish. I'm now going to show you an easy way to build an application. This is my 10 ideas system. So you've got an outline application, which is what you build for, or a core application. You should focus on about 400 words. So that is 10 ideas or propositions. And from that, you'll get 20 sentences of about 20 words each. So from that, you would be able to make a statement. That's your first sentence, followed by evidence. You can start it with an initial bullet point and develop it as an idea. So I will show you. The first is a statement of 20 words, and then you've got evidence from research, experience, or signposting for 20 words. And here's an example. This is the bullet point. This project provides childcare support alongside the training program. So your sentence to advocate that would be, we will provide creche and childcare support for students and their dependents that will run alongside the training courses. That's 19 words. And then your evidence to support that is previous research shows that this help needs to be available both before and after training to ensure students' full commitment. And if you've got any reports or other evidence to back that first sentence up, you should provide it. But there's two general examples of how to do it. So if you do that, you can build up 20 sentences about your project quite easily. But the first one is the proposition, whatever it is, and the second one is the evidence to back it up. Going to move on now as time's moving on. There are other issues you have to consider in applications now that are cross-cutting. They're called cross-cutting themes. They take a number of areas, but we're going to look at a few of these very briefly. First is equality and diversity, which is very important now, and you need to consider the impact on the project in terms of both equality and diversity in connection with young people, people from minority groups, disabled people, or any other disadvantaged groups. Under UK law, there are 7 strands of equality, and I've listed them there. And they include age, disability, race, gender, and sexuality. And then there are what they call 9 protected characteristics, which include age, disability, gender reassignment, marriage and civil partnership, pregnancy and maternity, and others. And you also always need to consider the impact of your project on these, and indeed what they will do to promote equality of opportunity and equal access to services as well. That's often overlooked, but some groups often find it very difficult to get equal access to services for whatever reason. So that's very important to take those considerations when you're writing your applications. Here are a number of common mistakes. Huge numbers of funding applications are ineligible, mostly due to not reading the guidance properly. Applications take a lot of time and energy, so don't waste them through carelessness. This was research done some years ago. Why didn't they succeed? In this particular round for a particular grant funding program, 203 applications out of 534 were ineligible in a previous round. Why was that? Well, 137 were due to not providing correct financial information, and that includes the budget not adding up or being incomplete last annual accounts if you've got them, and no bank account details given. So like I said earlier, this is not an inclusive process. So those things can knock you out at a very early stage. Other reasons including organisation wasn't eligible and or staff turnover was too high, asked for too much money, didn't state the project actions, so what it was going to do, and in terms of the funding required. This was another piece of research done a few years ago in terms of the lottery awards for all strand. 74% of applications were ineligible. The main problems were missing, because they asked for a specific set of information here, missing bank account details, referees, although you don't necessarily have to provide referees now, the constitutional status of organisations. You need, if you're a charity or a non-profit making organisation, you need to have at least 3 people on your management committee or board of directors, and they can't all be related. And then the contact's dates of birth, because they do authentication checks on awards for all. So by getting the basics right, that really improves your chances of getting awards for all funding. But it's surprising how many applications, I suspect, are done at short notice and don't achieve these. I'm going to give you now, as we're rounding off now, 10 tips and related information. These are for reference. Remember, it takes time to build up these skills, and there are many sources of help and support for your work. This is the first 5. It is essential that funding criteria is carefully read before deciding whether to apply. So you need to read the guidelines. Number 1, to make sure you're eligible to apply, and number 2, that you're completing the application form, if there is one, correctly. Make sure you think through exactly how the project will be managed and how the work will progress, because they're going to touch on that in the assessment of it. Make sure you're clear about the funding conditions and that you're able to meet these. So if you have to deliver whatever it is, skills or training to people or other services, then you're able to deliver those. Funders are increasingly likely to ask you what difference your service will make to people's lives. That's sometimes called social impact. So what's the impact of your project in the community? What difference will it make? So that's becoming more and more important. And some will ask you about an exit strategy or successive strategy for the project. So what that means is what's going to happen if you're funded over a year, for example, like the Awards for All Strands of the Lottery, or what's going to happen after that. You need to reference that. For example, the project could be run by volunteers after that, or you could run it in a different way or in partnership with others. There's many alternatives. Of course, you could look for other funding while the project is in progress with the lottery or whatever other funder is supporting it. Make sure you answer the question that the funder is actually asking. This is a key thing. You've got to, if they ask a question, you've got to answer it. Don't go off a tangent, and answer all the questions clearly, correctly, and succinctly. Make sure you provide any evidence which you can to support your application, but only if the funder asks for it. Sometimes if they ask for additional information, then you can supply additional information to provide it. Any data, community consultation, research, or social impact evidence that you've done or relates to your project or the area that you're working, that's very, very important for many funders now, because you've got to be able to essentially prove what your organization is doing or what it might do if it's a new organization. If you've got anything to back it up. The financial information, a budget you provide must be complete and correct. I was looking at an application a couple of days ago with an organization which was going to a funder in the City of London, which is managed by an accountancy firm. So of course, if you get the budget wrong, they're not going to be very happy, and it's likely that your application won't succeed. So budgets are very, very important. And if they require signature, make sure the application is signed by the relevant and appropriate persons, because some of these, the reason for some of that is that they may be legally binding, but certainly bigger applications will require either a personal or an electronic signature, but not always. And just to finish off, remember, it's not necessarily the good idea or project which gets the funding, it's the good applications, because if you can't illustrate what you're seeking to achieve or what you have achieved, and other people can, then you will lose out, even though you may deliver better quality services than others. So the next steps, start by working on short applications to build skills and confidence. If your organization does not have a track record, it will be difficult at first. And as I said right at the beginning, don't be a quitter, keep at it. This does take time. Try to work in partnership with others whenever possible, but remember, one good bid could pay off. It's not unusual. It's well worth doing. I'm going to stop the share in a minute. On your screen there, you've got our fundraising training pack, which covers many of these issues. You can buy either a download or a hard copy. As you can see, it's printed there. We're currently working on the second edition of this, which includes some others aspects of it. But you can buy this from us for £12 either for a download or £15 for a hard copy, which will be sent to you through the post. I'm going to stop the share now. So thank you for listening to me. I'm going to look at the chat, but if anybody's got a question they want to ask right now, if you can put your hand up on the screen, we can take it. Okay, let's have a look in the chat. I'll work through the chat, I think, but my details are on the email that you will get after this. So if you want to get back to me, please do. And now there's going to be a short handover to my colleague, Rick. Oh, sorry. Yeah, Isaiah.
Hi, thank you, Gary. That was very, very informative and very helpful. For new charities, so those of us just starting that might not necessarily have any sort of full accounts or annual accounts as such, yeah. And we're the ones sort of putting money into the activities that we're doing. How can we prepare for the bid writing exercise?
You know, there are many funders out there who will fund organizations that are new. You know, this has obviously happened during the pandemic. I've worked with several. What you should focus on in that particular case is the project itself, like we've just discussed, but also the people behind it. You know, if you think about it in business, I don't know if Alan Sugar and Richard Branson started up a new business jointly, it wouldn't have a track record, but look at their track record. So you can focus on that. But there are many funders that don't actually require a set of accounts. If you're in your first 12 months, you probably haven't got one anyway. So what they ask for is financial projections sometimes, but it can be limited. For example, the awards for all strand of the lottery will just ask you what your expected income for the year will be. They might ask for some other information as well, without going into a lot of detail, but that shouldn't stop you. What it will do is limit you. You're not going to be able to apply for any really big funding strands. You'll sort of be able to apply for smaller ones because they usually don't require this. But there are other ways of doing it as well without going into a lot of detail. You can work in partnership with other organizations, for example, but there are some issues around that because, of course, they will be the budget holder. So you'd have to make sure you've got an agreement with them on that. But there are charities out there. I know some of them have held funds for smaller projects and organizations, particularly where they've worked in partnership. So while it is a challenge, it's not impossible to address this, because no new projects, if you think about it, no new projects would get off the ground. Celia.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Hi. I have a dilemma. One of the things that I've been doing whilst applying for funding is applying to several funders for the same project.
Yes.
What happens, which has happened to me, you get three funding offers. How do you deal with that? So for me, I had another project that was in the making that was very similar. I got stuck on what to ask and who to ask. Can we change the project itself, and would we still get the funding? I just find that is a bit of a dilemma for me.
Yeah, I mean, that's quite an interesting problem to have. I mean, some people would say it's quite a good problem to have if you've got three funders. You need to be honest with the funders, I would say. You need to tell them you've got other funding, but you might be able to say to them, well, for example, I don't know if you were delivering services to 50 people. With your additional funding, we could deliver it to 100 people, or in a different or wider geographic area, or to a greater demographic of people. That, I think, many funders would be sympathetic towards. I mean, it's not guaranteed, I have to say, but if you're honest with the funders, you know, but you should not try and mislead them, because if they find out, they'll claw it back anyway. So it's best to try and negotiate and say, look, we've got funding from another source, but if we utilize this, we'll be able to deliver, you know, additional services or whatever else you think you can deliver. around that. But you must be quite a good bid writer if you've not got much experience and you've got 3 funders straight away. So
yeah, I don't know what's happened, because I've managed to get over 50,000 in the last year, but it's hard work because it's lots of small pots of money.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking that now we should be in a position to be applying for larger sums. Based on what you said earlier, 40% of your previous income.
Yeah, that's not exclusive. There are some funders that don't operate procurement rules. That's mainly public sector organizations, in my experience, that, you know, if you were applying for a very, very, very big grant, you know, like 500,000 plus or the 3 million from the Wellcome Trust, that might be an issue. It's something, you know, if you want to talk to me offline, I'm happy to talk to you about that, because it does depend on a number of circumstances around this, you know. So don't let it put you off. You just need to be realistic. You know, if you can justify what you're delivering, then it may be okay. But as I say, that the procurement aspects of it is mainly bigger funders and the public sector. There are a lot of smaller funders out there who will be sympathetic, and indeed during the pandemic, many of them have waived requirements, you know, or have rolled over outcomes over longer periods of time. So, you know, but as I say, I think the key to that is opening a dialogue with the funders, it's good that you're you know, it's been very difficult in the past year particularly for new organisations. So I think it's commendable what you've done, and keep at it.
Okay, I'd love to talk to you, so I'll connect with you after this.
Please do.
All right,
please do.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Yes. Yeah. I'm looking at the chat now. Can you say something about your success rate using your methods versus when you began, or normal success rates? I presume you're asking that of us here at CNT. It depends, I would say. It depends, because you have to compare like with like. If you're applying for bigger funders, then your success rate is going to be less. If you're applying for smaller funders, there are some funding strands that we've had 75–80% success on. For larger funds, it's less. But remember, you only have to hit the jackpot once, as it were, and you could get quite a large funding amount. What I would say is we've been going since 2003. So if our success wasn't sustainable, we wouldn't be here. So, but, you know, today we're talking about how you can do it. But I'll be quite happy to talk to you again offline with some examples of that. Somebody else has asked, I have to go, can we have a copy of the presentation? Yes. There will be a summary one sent out by email if you registered with us today. It's important that you should have registered. Another question from Maria Loney: do funders look more favourable at charities, or can you be a sole trader or limited company? I think the answer to that, it depends on what you're applying for and what sector you're in. For example, digital services, which we do quite a bit of work in, you can apply as any kind of organisation or status. I think that it does depend on the sector, though. Generally speaking, many people will not, or organisations will not, accept bids from individuals. Like I said at the beginning, most bigger funders and the public sector prefer to deal with organisations for a whole set of reasons, which I won't go into now, rather than individuals. But having said that, the Wellcome Foundation, which is Britain's biggest funder, which is around health and health research, they will accept applications from individuals. There are some strands on that. So that's why I said right at the beginning, you need to do your funding research. That's what we do an awful lot of here, but it is generally more difficult to get funding as a sole trader rather than as a charity, a limited company. And of course, what you have missed out there is non-profit making companies, social enterprises, community interest companies, and others which are becoming more popular, which can also trade and get grant funding. So again, if you want to talk to me offline, I can give you some more information about that as well. Another question from Fran, can business startups apply for funding? Yes, but it depends where you are, what sector you're in, and what you want to apply for. Sometimes as well, you can get not necessarily funding, but you can get support, i.e. expertise. It does depend on what your business is doing and what you want to utilize that funding for. But you need to know where to look for it as well. So the business startups can apply for funding, but it is limited, and it depends on your location and what sector you're in. I've got 4 other new messages here. Yeah, some people are asking for my email address. I will put that in the chat shortly, but it's gary.parker@cntassociates.com, or look up cntassociates.com online. There's a few other questions related to what's happening about the presentation, which I will respond to. Yeah, Daphne's question about do they, when they say fund charities, does that include CICs and companies limited by guarantees? It depends. Some funders, like some that I've mentioned there today, will only fund registered charities. I think that's what you're talking about. There are others. I've given 2 examples on the revenue. There's one called Garfield Weston. They will only fund, they're a big funder, they will only fund registered charities generally. And the one underneath it, the Henry Smith charity, will fund other types of non-profit making organizations as well. I mean, again, they are a big funder, so it does depend. That's where your research comes in.
Can I just elaborate on the question, because I was also wondering if you've heard of partnerships being funded, 2 companies that make a partnership for a specific project.
Yeah, I mean, it depends who the lead partner is. I mean, if you've got a non-profit making organization as the lead partner, then that's probably more likely to succeed. But if you've got strategic or other support from a big private sector organization, then that may well help with the application as well, particularly if they can support it with either direct funding or support in terms of expertise or premises or whatever. So again, it does depend on the sector as well about that, because some sectors like digital, like well-being, like health and social care, there is a lot of encouragement for partnerships.
Okay. Right, thank you.
Again, if you want to contact me offline, then I'll be happy to talk to you more about that.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I've got another question from Bern. Would you recommend using bullet points within your application rather than paragraphs? I think the answer to that is it depends on the word allocation. I mean, I would generally write paragraphs, but if you've got to do it in 200 words, a lot, or 200 to 400 words these days, if you're running out of word space and you think those points are essential, then yes, bullet point it, because at least they're in there, even if they're incomplete. But that is a big challenge these days. everything boiled down to between 200 and 400 words. It's very, very common now. Isaac said the Directory of Grant Making Trusts is a good source, a big book that costs over £100. Yeah, I've got one myself, but there's a lot of free sources online. Grants Online is a good one. There's a whole set of other ones as well. And there's some charity sites that are good as well, or very, very low cost. So before you go shelling out £100, look on the internet or contact us, and we've got some lists that we've not utilized today because of space reasons. But I think that's it in terms of questions. If anybody else has got any questions, then please get in touch with us. And I'm now going to hand over to Rachel Barham from FSB, so there's going to be a very quick change.
Hi everyone, it's like musical chairs today. So I think I've met some of you before, but for those that don't know me, I'm Rachel Barham. I'm actually an independent membership advisor for the Federation of Small Businesses, FSB for short. We're actually a not-for-profit campaigning group that lobbies on behalf of you, the small business owners, to make sure local government, national government have small business interests at the forefront of their minds when they're rolling out new policies, agendas, etc. Things that impact on you and your budgets and profits, I suppose. But what I'm going to do today is I'm actually going to just take you through the website, which might sound silly. We can all look at a website ourselves, but the FSB one is quite detailed. And it actually gives you a lot of information that you can digest in your own time, but also have a look and see what's relevant to you, because not having spoken to a lot of you, I don't know what industries you're in. So of course I can't make it specific to you. Hence why I've put my Calendly link in the chat, so that if you do want to discuss things further, learn more about what FSB can do for your organisation, we can do that, and obviously I can then tailor it to yourselves. But there's a lot of information around the campaigns that we do. So some of these will be local campaigns in regards to what local councils are doing, but the ones that are on the website typically tend to be the larger campaigns that we're running. So for any of you that are just starting up small businesses, there is the Small Business Hub in there. There's also a freelancers hub as well. So you've got to start your business with FSB, and it will tell you lots of useful information, tips that you need to think of, details about sort of insurances, all of this sort of stuff. If you're doing business that's affected by Brexit, there's the UK Transition Hub as well. There's lots of information that you can glean from the website, and it's all free. For members, you would also get a lot more information, which I will go into in a second. If your business, I suppose, is boosted by networking, we do absolutely loads of events. So we have 3 types of events. One is your typical networking. At the minute, it's all online, so you're not restricted to where you live or where your business is based. If you want to network in Scotland, you can. It's absolutely fine. But one tip when you're trying to book things on the website, don't use this search bar, because it's linked to a postcode, but of course where the events are online there isn't a postcode, so it's not always bringing up the areas that you need. If you scroll down and use the regions tab, you can then narrow it down to the area that you're based in or the area that you want to network. Greater London, obviously it's the best place to be because that's where we're based, and it will select and show you what's available. So we've got some coming up. You've got Women in Business, there's a Westminster one, and Gary and I actually co-host together. Gary is the host for FSB Bexley, and that's always the 3rd Wednesday of the month at 11 o'clock, which you are all more than welcome to come along to and see what's involved in FSB networking. But we also do other types of events. So we have masterclasses, which are events that are put on by members in specific fields, with an element of networking. So it's a bit of a learning, typically in lunch breaks. But we also do webinars as well. So they're your heavier topics. It might be when the pandemic hit, insurances, grants, but making tax digital when that was first announced. But you can see a few sample ones there at the top, so you can have a look. But again, you can book yourself onto any of these. We've also got, so on here, the one thing I do ask though is if you're ever looking to join FSB, please don't do it via the website. Please come to me directly, because it's like any organisation. If you join via the website, you're, I suppose, just a number and you haven't necessarily got the personal contact when you need it. If you contact me, I'll always act as a single point of contact for you and help you, so you don't have to remember everything that's involved. But under the Join Us section, it goes through a lot of the benefits that you get as a member. So regardless of whether I speak about any of these, as a member, you get everything. So the best one, as far as I'm concerned, is we give our members free business legal advice. So anything where you think, I need to speak to a solicitor, and that could be whether it's contractual, commercial, employment, tax, VAT, health and safety, doesn't matter what it is, you can give them a call and they'll get the right type of solicitor to call you back. Linked to it, you've also got what's called the Legal Hub, and on there you will have access to about 1,200 documents that you might need as a small business. Things like contracts, non-disclosure agreements, employment documents, health and safety. There's even some training videos on there as well. So there's lots of useful guides, fact sheets, and also the documents that you will need. And the biggest one, I think, also in there is the legal protection. Many insurances charge extra for legals even, and they also have so many exclusions, and it is sod's law, isn't it? If something comes up, it will be in that exclusion list. We will protect you up to £100,000 worth of legal cover per claim, and that's to make sure that you've got the peace of mind when something goes wrong, there is somebody out there to turn to, and that's what FSB will do, pick up that for you, liaise with you, and potentially fight the case for you, depending obviously what it is. But I can go into that in more detail on an individual basis, because obviously there'll be different examples, case studies that I can let you know about. But we can also help you out with things like your insurances, your banking, and keep your costs down, because FSB is all about saving small businesses money. We're not there to make money out of you. We are there just to help you achieve your ambition and to thrive. We want all businesses to thrive. And of course, in the small business community, it is all very much about collaborations rather than the corporate world where we're all enemies. But have a look through here. It'll give you lots of useful things to think about as well in your business, because when you're starting up, you don't automatically think about debt recovery and someone not paying you. But depending what you're doing, it might be something that you come across. And then finally, there's the skills section. So there's lots of useful fact sheets on here that can help you setting up your business, but also in areas maybe that you're not as strong. When we go into business, we tend to pick areas that we know and that we've worked in, or it's our passion. So we know those inside out, but it's when things happen outside of those areas that we come across, basically. And that's where FSB steps in. We act, I suppose, as a one-stop shop for you to know that you've always got somebody to turn to, and we can help you. So if you just scroll through, there's various different blogs, downloads. We'll keep you up to date with legislation changes, things that are going on in government that will affect you. But then there's also some skills learning on here. So if your industries, organisations are doing things online and maybe you're not glued up with social media, there's also a lot of help with that sort of thing as well. So get started with social. There's webinars on there. They're very short, concise, but they at least give you the starting points to know what to do in your business online. But I'll stop it there because I know obviously we've overrun slightly today anyway. But I've put all my details in the chat. If you do want to know any more, give me a call or drop me a message. I can see one message in there. Is FSB relevant to CICs? Definitely. Doesn't matter if you're a charity, a CIC, social enterprise. The only organisations we can't work with are PLCs. But it's for anybody 0 employees up to 249. Believe it or not, you'll have similar issues whether you need to speak to solicitors. Doesn't matter whether you're a charity or a profit-making business. It's irrelevant. You still have these challenges. Membership starts from £177. That's based on an organisation with 0 employees. It actually goes down in year 2. So unlike insurances, it goes down. And it will go down by £30 because we only charge the registration fee in year 1. Goes up from there based on the number of employees. So again, that would be conversations that we would have individually. And membership is personal. So if any of you do have multiple businesses, it actually covers all of them. You don't have to register separately for each of them. You can just register for the one and use the services. I think that's all the questions that I can see, but if there are any, obviously just let me know. I've put my contact details in the chat, but what I'll do is when I swap places with Gary, I'll re-put it in there just in case somebody joined after I put them in there. Perfect. Yes.
Right, we've had another quick change. Thank you everybody for bearing with us today. The last time I met Rachel was in March 2020, and she had COVID, we think then, and I was sat about 6 feet away from her in our office, and I didn't get it. So social distancing does work. And my colleague who was here at the time as well didn't get it either. So I'm glad to see her fit and well. And also, I'd like to thank you all for coming on today. You will get an email after this with various offers. We've also got a YouTube channel. If you just go into YouTube and search for CNT Associates, we've got some of our presentations online there. And we'll be adding more to that. So please subscribe. It's free, of course, and will help us to help you. So I'm very grateful for all the time you spent with us today. And if you need any further information, please contact me at info@cntassociates.com as well. And we will be repeating this in October, but we do offer coaching and support. And of course, there is our, can't quite see it, there it is, our fundraising guide. If you want to buy that offers, it will be in the offer coming to you very soon. And I will be back again in about 2 weeks' time with Rachel at the FSB Bexley event. You don't have to be a member of the FSB or indeed live in Bexley or be a business in Bexley. It's a anyone in the UK can access it, and we'll look forward to seeing you there. And look at our website for more funding and other events coming up soon. I'd like to thank you all for joining us today, and I wish you well with your project or organisation, whatever it is. Take care. Bye.